right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Justin the Sapien podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Professor Iyengar, who is I believe, a civil engineer originally in India, but I came across him in my studies of Vedic sciences, and particularly with weather forecasting in the ancient Vedic text, as well as just some of his other very fascinating work. I also believe he's done a lot of work with earthquakes, but we'll let him kind of take us through that. But Professor Iyengar, welcome. Thank you for being on the show tonight. And yeah, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing. Are you currently affiliated with any universities, and give us kind of a little bit of background about yourself.
You want me to say something about what I am doing right now, or my background?
Your background, in essence.
Okay. Well, I'm around 80 years right now. I have spent much of my time working at the Indian Institute of Science as a professional, that is, as a professor of structural engineering and engineering seismology. On the other side, the city is Bangalore, where I live. Bangalore, you might have heard, it's a beautiful city, no doubt, but affected by very heavy traffic. So the traffic is the problem in this city. Otherwise, it is a nice city to live. So I've been living here in this part of India, South India. My hometown is Mysore. Mysore is a town very near to Bangalore. That's where I was brought up, spent my childhood, my education. My family is rather, if I should say something about my parents, were very orthodox South Indian Brahmins, so to say. And the Iyengars are particularly orthodox from Tamil Nadu. They are originally from Tamil Nadu, migrated to Karnataka at the instance of one of the kings of Mysore because of the scholarship that my forefathers were supposed to be having, which I don't know much about anyway. That is how we settled in Mysore. That was a beautiful town. And I was educated both in the school. The schools mean the English type of schools, where English is also taught. That is the westernized school, so to say. That was quite popular in the 20th century. Now, of course, mostly that is the kind of schooling you get in this country. But when I was a kid, two things were possible. Even now, theoretically, that is possible, but nobody takes it very seriously. That is a traditional education in Sanskrit, so to say. There is a Sanskrit Pathshala, a college. So I was sent as a young boy to both the places. So early in the morning, I would go for my Sanskrit education. From 11 o'clock, I would take to my school education. That is how I grew up. So I have always been attracted by the intellectual traditions and other traditions in this country. So to say, my cultural background. Nevertheless, the rational approach and the mathematical and the scientific approach that has been taught to me in the schools and the colleges, and later on when I did my research work on theory of nonlinear systems, mathematical modeling, and weather forecasting, the rainfall predictions in the modern day by data analysis, large-scale data modeling and all that. So I was always curious how this country has come so much in about maybe 4,000 years, or maybe less, maybe more. So after my formal retirement from the Indian Institute of Science, I've been more concentrating on understanding the ancient Sanskrit texts, starting from the Vedas. That has been my primary work right now. But I haven't forgotten my mathematics, nor of my engineering approach to earthquakes and other problems, which are problems of natural sciences. That is always of interest, whether for the ancients or whether for the moderns. Like, for example, recently I read a note that NASA has found out a crater in Luna called the Luna crater, which is in the Gujarat Ran of Kutch region. That crater was known, but recently I read that NASA has done some further investigation into it and fixed the date of that crater, that it happened about 7,000 years ago or so. That is somewhere, let us say, in the 4th or the 5th millennium BC. These are the things which have interested me because in the Rig Veda there is mention of craters, there is mention of celestial bodies falling on ground, but they are kind of metaphorical. So they would say that a huge demon fell down on the earth and he went down deep inside the earth. And the gods were happy once he went down and things like that. They would look like mythological, but there has to be a physical connection because the human mind wants some background to create a poetry or to create a story or to create a theory. And these are concerning nature, concerning earth, concerning atmosphere, concerning the sky, and hence my interest has been to look into natural sciences in Sanskrit texts, starting from the most ancient period. I think that should be okay for an introduction.
Yes, excellent. You couldn't have done a better introduction. Um, so you go through these ancient texts, and are you going through them kind of one area at a time? Are you looking particularly at astronomy and weather, or is it kind of any part of the natural sciences is fascinating to you?
See, the ancient texts, they are mostly concerning the sky and the atmosphere, less with the earth, so to say, in the way that we look nowadays. But all the three are interconnected. The picture that I get in the ancient period, they were thinking that the whole universe is one. It is a whole. Not that we are separate, sky is separate, the stars are separate, the planets are separate, like that. So there was always an appeal. It would say that Jauh Pita Prithvi Mata. That would mean, for me, the sky is the father, earth is the mother. That is the kind of text which is there in the Vedas. So they were looking at it from a different perspective. And that perspective was more about what they could see, what they could hear. And that was, you can understand, that in the ancient geographical situation they had in the Indian subcontinent, maybe they did not have a full idea of what we today call Earth. They would have considered it as Prithvi, which should extend up to the horizon, whatever they could see. And then the world, which was the sky. And in between was the Antariksham, or the atmosphere, or the open space. So what they could see, they explained more. And what they could meditate on, that is what they have explained more. Rather than about the continents on earth, whether the earth is round or it is flat, or which river is there in Russia or in Europe, no such things are there. So you can only correlate, so to say, mostly with India, that also particularly the northern part of India.
Okay, I didn't.
So
Yeah.
I'm just taking it as it comes. Whatever is there, I'm studying it and trying to see how I can internalize that text and how this country or this culture has evolved in the 3 to 4 thousand years of time. Of course, today everything is topsy-turvy. It is not like in the same old time. But that has come through as a filtered information and that cannot be avoided. It is like a river which has come, and the river, where some reaches are highly polluted and some reaches are beautiful. But nevertheless, the starting point is the same point, is the same river.
Yes, yes, I love it. So for the audience listening, I mean, obviously you would have to be finding that there are accurate things that are being spoken of in these ancient texts or in the Vedas, and that there are things that were discovered long before the modern world discovered them. I mean, can you tell us about kind of a couple examples that stick out to you that are things that were known thousands of years ago that weren't discovered until much later by a more modern science?
Well, that's a rather, loaded question.
Hmm.
We got to see what is known in modern times, and then a comparison can be held on that. If your question is about in modern times, we have nuclear bombs and we have nuclear reactors, and whether in the Vedas nuclear reactors were known, my answer is no. No, it is not there. I mean, that is not the kind of thing which is there. But if you ask, uh, in the modern science, there are concepts like relativity, that time can be relative. In If somebody moves at the light of as the speed of light, then one can extend time dilation, as they say, and all that. Such concepts were there that you could see. I would say that the Brahma's period is different. His 100 years is equivalent to our maybe 4 million years and things like that. So such concepts are there. And that may also be extension of what they understood during meditation and by analyzing sleep. Like in sleep, many times we have a dream as though so many things happen. But when you open your eyes and look at the watch, maybe only 2 minutes would have passed, or maybe 3 minutes would have passed. But you would have seen your whole school education gone through in 3 minutes, like that. So people would have come to the conclusion that such things are possible in this world.
Hmm.
Now,
And then would you say that there's quite a few, if we were to focus on astronomical information or understanding of celestial bodies, planets, or things of that nature, that there are things that were very early on discovered, thousands of years ago that are in the Vedas that weren't necessarily discovered in modern science till only recent times?
you please repeat your question.
So would you also say that for the Vedas that there's quite a bit of astronomical information that was discovered thousands of years ago that's only been discovered in recent times, but particularly maybe that's formation of planets or stars or different components of astronomical information that were very much known. For example, I'm forgetting the name of the tribe. I think it's the Dogon, or I can't remember the tribe in Africa, but they knew about another star, I believe connected with Sirius, that we didn't even know existed way until after the telescope was invented. And they thought that, there's no way people could know this without modern telescopes, but they have it in their culture, in their stories, very clear information. Is there things like that happening in the Vedas?
They do. They do. There are many such questions which are not very clear even to this day, which are celestial. Now, how do we interpret this text? They're in Sanskrit, and the traditionally in India, we have at least today more than 200 or 250 textbooks. That means by that I mean printed books concerning Vedas, what we call Veda, traditionally in India. What language it is? Generally, it is said Sanskrit. But by Sanskrit, people have different opinions, different interpretations. If you talk to the linguists, you know this story that William Jones was a Chief Justice in the Calcutta High Court who learned Sanskrit from Pandits in Calcutta, and later on he took it to Europe and he spread Sanskrit grammar and Sanskrit as a language which is linked with Latin, Greek, and then the Indo-European language concept came up in Europe, and the Germans took it up in great detail with great interest. And then, a new theory of linguistics started. The modern theory of linguistics is only about 200 years old. Whereas in India, the kind of linguistics or the tradition of Sanskrit grammar, so to say, it's about 2000 years. That is from the time of Panini, so to say. But Panini himself, he did not do anything. He only talked about the spoken Sanskrit, which was prevalent during his period. By that time, the Vedas had already been fixed. So everybody agrees, even the modern Indologists who have looked into this, that the Rig Veda ended by 1500 BC. So the other Vedas have come after 1500 BC. So to understand the language, which is already 3000 years older than the grammar of Sanskrit, is going to be highly questionable, and it is going to be a tough proposition. I will give one example. Many of the modern scholars, particularly the Westerners, they have tried to fix a date for Rig Veda. And that is all dependent on what they would call an Aryan invasion into India. Is a theory that around 1500 BC, so-called Aryans entered India. They brought their language also, Sanskrit, into India and all that kind of thing. It's a huge theory which is taught even today in the schools and colleges all over the world. But if you look into the Vedas proper, there is nothing like that. And on the other hand, astronomically, there is a mention of a pole star. Pole star in a celestial region, in the northern region, in a constellation called Shishumara. Shishumara is roughly a whale or an aquatic animal which has 4 legs. It is not a fish. It has 4 legs. And that constellation, with 14 stars, it is described. And the tip of that star, at the end of that constellation, it is said there is a star which is fixed, that doesn't move in the sky. And that is called Dhruva. Dhruva in Sanskrit means fixed. So Dhruva can mean a tree which is fixed, earth which is fixed, a star which is fixed, or anything which is true. See, the language is fluid like that. But in the celestial context, it has to be only a star. It cannot be anything else. because it talks of other things which are moving. Now, if by modern astronomy you analyze this situation, we know that today we have a pole star, that is Polaris or the Ursa Minor, the Alpha Ursa Minor. This star came to the pole position only around 500 years back. Before that, there was no pole star. There was one during 2850 BC. That is roughly in the third millennium BC. That was Tuban. That is called today Tuban by modern astronomers. And it is agreed that, the Egyptian pyramids were also built approximately during the same period. Now, why would the Vedic texts, which are repeated today even in our temples in South India, they would use this mantra, this hymn, Bhuh Prapadye, Bhuh Prapadye, it starts like that. Why would they do it? And they say that there is a star in the northern sky which looks fixed. It is called Abhayam and all that. So my question is, today I may use it for some other purpose. It is emotional, so to say. But it clearly indicates somebody had seen that. Otherwise, they would not have known that. You may argue that it might be a inherited memory. Fine. For me, my culture is an inherited memory only. It is nothing else. So for them also it might have been inherited. But the cultural footprint which is there, it is chronological. That chronological thing is actually celestial. And why did they do that? With reference to that, they developed their social structure. Because even today in the marriages, in the Hindu marriage, there is one small item called Dhruva Darshanam. That means looking at Dhruva. Now the bride has to look at Dhruva and a mantra is uttered by the husband. And he has to say that you be fixed in my family like Dhruva. Dhruva is fixed in the sky and he rotates all the planets and stars. You be like that in my family and we will all go around you. And that is an empowerment mantra. And, in 5,000 years ago, when they saw this and they decided they will bring it into the social custom. Don't ask me today whether the priest know, because you have been in India, you might have observed some of the marriages. Many of these things are finished in the morning itself, where they can't look at any of the thing, but they will show in some direction and finish the mantra. That is a different matter. That is a ritual. But the meaning behind the ritual and what we can understand from our ancient texts is that they had a one-to-one relationship with the sky. And later, they have observed that there have been disturbances in the sky, like the comets and like the asteroids. And they talk about the demons falling on the ground, as I told you already. And in fact, I had written about this, that in the Rann of Kutch region, in the Gujarat region, today it is a desert. It's a salt desert. That means there is nothing which grows there, but it's a highly earthquake-prone region. And there are craters there. And in that region, as I said in the beginning, there seems to have been an impact crater created about 5 to 6,000 years ago. This has been studied by modern astronomers also. So it seems that there is a connection. And this is something which is useful to humanity as a whole, not just to a few Indians or to a few Orthodox people. That means there is a climatic change which can occur. And there are large descriptions in the Vedas where they pray to sun that don't go away from us. We want to see you. And you have been absconding for a very long time. Please show us. And what would they mean? They count. They can know that so many days have passed. Nevertheless, sun, the bright sun, they could not see. And he says, you are covered by a whole veil or a mask. Now, this has been interpreted by many Sanskritists as a mythological thing or something concerning the dark night of the soul. And they take it into philosophical issues that, the human being, he doesn't know what it is. True. This could have arisen out of it. See, when intellectual beings, when human beings, they see something in the sky physically that is happening suddenly, they will wonder, what is the position of human beings in this universe? What is the relationship between the humans and the sky? And what is universe? And all these questions come up. And obviously, Vedanta, what we say as philosophy in India, which has come up in the Upanishads, which questions, is time really true? Is life really true? Is the world really an imagination, or is it a reality? All these philosophical questions have come up. They are mentioned in the text. So if you combine all of this, you get a different opinion. But if you analyze them, you can see a development for about 3 to 4,000 years of the tradition, of the intellectual tradition, before the Common Era. The Common Era, you can say that roughly from the time of Buddha. Buddha was about 500 BC, let us say. That is a historical period, as it is said. This is far behind it. It is about 2 to 3,000 years behind that. But you can see through Buddhism and also Jainism. Jainism is not so well known outside. They all have these concepts. They also carry the similar celestial pictures which are there in the Vedic text, but interpret it in different ways and give different meanings to them, develop different philosophies. For example, in the Vedic philosophy, one would say, Sarvam Brahmamayam, everything is Brahman, everything is God. Whereas the Jains would say that truth can be in 6 ways. It can be this or that, or neither this nor that, and kind of thing. So different things come up. And in the Buddhist philosophy, I don't want to, you may know better than me on those things, they would go in a slightly different way, but they're all connected. So these three together, they owe their origin to the Vedic civilization and the Vedic culture, which was essentially a celestial culture. That means it got all its inspiration by looking at the sky, whether positive, whether negative, whether good, whether bad.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
and measurement of time by observing sunrises. Even to this day, the religious day is sunrise to sunrise in India. From one sunrise to the other sunrise is considered a religious day. So for religious purpose, that is the one. And you can see any person or any culture which would like to know how time flows, the first thing is sun. It's a morning, evening, morning, evening. They did that. They did it and they preserved that information. The important thing is that. But that information was oral. You know that there were no written texts till about 500 BC. So orally it was transmitted. That is what I meant, the ancient educational tradition in India, which continues to this day. There are schools where Vedas are taught orally. Of course, they learn a few other things. But in the most ancient time, I don't know what they learned. All their learning would have been only with the nature. What I do is, I take the printed text. Not all are yet printed. Many of them are in script form, manuscript. And many are lost. Because in the oral tradition, if that family dies then you know that oral tradition is gone. Nobody knows what it is. So that is the situation when it concerns the corpus of knowledge India has, the ancient corpus, which is essentially in Sanskrit, later on brought into other languages. So my concentration or my focus is mainly Sanskrit, even though I look into other texts also.
Okay. Yeah, it's curious of how, India does, even though India went through colonization, how Sanskrit is still alive in the culture, how it is still moving in the culture every day. I was just reading about, essentially the Incas in Peru, where I currently live. They were very similar. They seem to be an astronomical society. And actually, there's been a lot of researchers who've come to Cusco. And what they found is essentially that Cusco was originally mapped to match the sky. So this idea of bringing the sky down into marriage with the earth, and you can also see how in Indian culture that was done also just in terms of culturally, right? In terms of how it manifests and the how the mythos evolves. And I think that's something that is more and more curious because I think it's really easy to look at these ancient traditions, and now the one view is very much of like, oh, it's all spiritual, it's all about your soul, it's all about consciousness and these things. But the more and more that I really see things, it's very much, first and foremost, it was astronomical, and it was geography, it's landscape, it's how the land and the seasons and the animals and all of these things in combination. And then that was used to create the mythos in order to remember, because that's a big thing, is how do you pass this down in an oral tradition. And so, but India is so unique because there's not a lot of ancient culture that's as intact as India, and a lot has been lost, but there's still a lot that's there. And so, I mean, you talked a little bit about this in some ways, but I mean, essentially, what's the hardest part of this kind of discovery and research? Is it primarily the linguistic challenges of different interpretations, or is it now that you kind of understand the general idea that it is describing the sky and the combination of how the sky interacts with the earth? Is it getting easier to understand the text?
I mean, the question is, with the modern knowledge, whether we understand the text?
No, I'm what I'm saying is, as you, because you read Sanskrit, right? And how traditionally with these texts, like you talked about, there's all sorts of debates happening all the time of, does this part of the script mean this or does it mean that? Is it getting easier for you? Do you feel like what's the challenge for you, or is it getting easier over time?
I mean, your question is not very clear to me in the
Okay. Okay.
sense
No worries.
the
Is the
ah,
interpretation of the text getting easier for you with time, or is the interpretation still one of the biggest challenges leading to further understanding?
no, interpretation is in between. Once it is neither very challenging nor it is easy, but the uh, background that we are having, because when I study a book, I'm having my own biases. For example, when I started studying Indian history, I read all kinds of books, not just Sanskrit. I was taught in English and in other languages. It would say that, like I said, the Aryans entered India. Max Muller, was a very great scholar, no doubt, because he was the first person to print Rig Veda, a critical edition of Rig Veda and all that. So he is held in high regard even to this day. There is no doubt on that. But he proposed the theory that the Aryans entered India from Asia Minor and they were originally with the Iranians. And all these people came from the steppes in Germany or somewhere like these kinds of things. I started with the same bias. When I started reading the text, then I wondered why I don't get any of these there in the text. So I had to change my thinking totally. One aspect is I have an advantage that I've been brought up in a particular culture. As I said, I'm in a river. I'm at one end of the river. It belongs to the river. But I can go up and then see what may be there. That advantage a foreigner may not have because he may come from some other place. He has an objectivity, whereas mine may be subjective. So, in that sense, my problem is more time consuming and to keep my brain and mind dispassionate, that I should not go either this way nor go that way. I should not become too emotional, not chauvinistic, or trying to glorify that Vedas knew nuclear reactors, Vedas knew planetary travel, things like that. On the other hand, I don't accept what the Harvard professors would say about linguistics, that Sanskrit, Latin is this, and there is a PIE language they propose. There's a Proto-Indo-European, which was spoken somewhere in a corner in a place called Anatolia, and then try to analyze how it might have spread and all that. And that's an academic work. I agree. And that is published in the best of the journals today. That is in one area that is happening. I have great regard for that. But that is not my interest. I don't believe that is the truth. The issue is going to be what is true. It's a very hazy subject. Truth again becomes sometimes pretty relative. And it would depend on time, not just on the people. Now, to give an example, we know today Earth is going around Sun. Maybe 1,000 years back, the majority of the people thought, no, it is not so. Earth was fixed. Even in India, it was geocentric astronomy. And the best of the astronomers, the Siddhantic astronomers, Aryabhata, Brahmagupta, Bhaskara, Leelavati, they are all the mathematicians and mathematical astronomy people. They got their correct results with fixed Earth. So the position of the planets they had and the eclipse prediction they did, they were all true. How accurate is another matter. And hence the question comes up. And all this is concerning time. Time, what does time mean to human beings? That is the single question, as I have seen in the Vedas. If you ask a question which is common to all humanity, that is what is time. And, there are so many descriptions of that. Like Kala, then there is a being, a form is given, and he is worshipped as this. Now moon is called Kala, sun is called Kala. They all represent time, no doubt. Nevertheless, is it time? There is something deeper than that. And in one of the Vedas, very interesting, it says, before birth of sun, it was non-time, akala. It doesn't say there was no time. It was non-time. From the birth of sun only, time has started. That is kala. Kala means discretization. The time which is discrete, which we human beings understand, as a day or a second or as month, year, and all that. It is only after the birth of sun. And all the questions, whether in the Rig Veda, Samaveda, in the Upanishads, what is time? Even today, the same question, I'm sure the physicists will be asking. You can't answer. And the yogis will say something else. The Vedanta, they would say self is same as time. And they would say it is all same and all that. Well, you get into another area altogether. It's very interesting. It's all human beings have to wonder about. And this is what has been taught to us in the traditional system also. And that is how I got interested. It is not simply proving some theorem, whether the Pythagorean theorem was known in India or not, things like that. They were all, okay, they have become secondary, but it's all connected with time.
Okay.
And that gives something for human beings also, because human beings have to continue on this planet, right? So they have to wonder what it is. We may be thinking that we would like to go to moon, we may like to go to Mars and all that. Ancient peoples also thought like that. There have been many statements. There are some ancient astronomical books. One which I am right now editing about cosmology and things like that. It says, I've just given an example of that. You see a mark on moon with naked eye. I am sure you would have seen it, You see a mark on moon that looks like a rabbit. So in Sanskrit, a rabbit is called shasha. So the Sanskrit word for moon, one of the word is shashi. Shashi means one who has a rabbit. Moon has a rabbit, so he can be called shashi. And shashanka, that means he is keeping a rabbit in him. That is the meaning which is there. That is used in Sanskrit even to this day. There are many people whose name is Shashanka, Shashidhar, Shashi. You might have come across some Indians like that. They may not know what it means, but it is all connected with moon. Now the text I am editing, it says there is water and moon. And sun is heat. But the sun's heat is not the ordinary fire. It is the primal fire out of which the other planets came up, like the Venus, the Jupiter, and all that. But moon, he has water and is cold. That is the first statement, cosmological statement which comes. And then the mark which is there, it reflects earth because it has water and it reflects earth. And it says the mark is the form of earth on moon. And if you see, you take a map and see that, there are people who have constructed this map also. It looks like a reflection of Asia and the two Americas put together. There is a tree kind of thing, then there is a rabbit kind of thing. You take the two together, it looks like a 90-degree, like a mirror reflection. Now, this is all already 3,000 years old. It can be dated. The text can be dated. I am working on the dating also. And there may be imagination and maybe beautiful thinking, whatever it may be. So they thought about this. And one of the names for Mars is son of Earth. So somehow they knew Mars looks like Earth. And the recent photographs which NASA has put up, sometimes I wonder whether I'm seeing a photograph of a dried up canal or a dried up river or something like that. Maybe imagination, but it is there. But I can't conclude that they were able to know all of this from modern methods.
Right. And so with so many fascinating things with you mentioned earlier, being kind of educated in these two different streams of a more, um, I don't want to use the word Western, but let's use the word Western right now, and then a more traditional education. And so, are I've seen you speak as well about kind of, the fact that there are other ways of knowing in other sciences. And are you, I'm curious to know about the landscape of um, Indian thought in these ways today, right? From my experience, a lot of Indian culture at the government level, as well as in most of the education system, it is very much more Western focused. And already you have lots of doctors who are practicing more of a Western biomedical medicine. They're losing Ayurveda. They don't think about Ayurveda as much. And you're seeing this, in the government, right? In their meteorology, they're using a much more Western reductionist science approach. Is that kind of the general landscape today in India, or is this kind of research something that there's a lot of other people excited about the type of work that you're doing? Is it happening a lot, or is it very little?
See, this kind of work, it's very esoteric, rather elitistic, and hence it is limited. But it has been happening in many places, and always there is a question. It has something to do with, I don't know what you call it, epistemology, or the the knowledge generation. How do I get
Theory
knowledge?
of knowledge, yeah,
Yeah, theory of
epistemology.
knowledge and all. So there are people who look at the yogic approach for knowledge, the yoga approach. Yeah, I'm sure you might have heard about it, which should be a meditative approach that may not give the same information what you may get through a telescope or through a microscope, but it may give a holistic knowledge. So the information and the knowledge, is it analytical or is it synthetical? It is like looking at a beautiful painting and then trying to see what threads are used, what colors are used. That is analysis. Analysis we may do, we may get some information, but the holistic picture is important. That is actually the yogic, or you may say philosophical approach. And somehow or other, even though there has been a lot of intellectual work in this country before the Western system came up, that is, you see, the mathematics, so to say. The analytical mathematics was developed extraordinarily, and I can say even to this day, much of the mathematics which is studied all over the world up to the high school level, I won't say about the pure mathematics, but about the practical mathematics, developed in India by 12th century, 12th and 15th century. That is what is being given up in other languages and doing. On the other hand, there is also a tradition of yoga where you get knowledge intuitively, and that is a parallel. It is not something opposing. It is not an enemy to intellectualism. Intuition is not an enemy to intellectual thing. Many people think like that. That is wrong, actually. The proponents of that in recent years was Aurobindo. You would have heard of Aurobindo, maybe. Have you heard of Aurobindo?
No.
Oh, he started in Pondicherry, and he was actually educated in Cambridge, but he came to India during, was a freedom fighter, and now there is a French lady who went to Pondicherry to be with him, and there is a Auroville in Tamil Nadu where they have a
Okay.
huge colony and all. He was the prime mover in recent years of proposing this kind of thing, which is possible. And you know, one important example of this was a mathematician by name Ramanujan. Have you heard of him?
Yes, I
Okay,
believe, isn't there a famous movie? There's
correct.
a movie about
Right,
him.
right,
Yeah.
right. And also, person who knew infinity. That
Hmm.
is the name. Yeah. He got all his theorems till he went to Hardy to be in UK with Hardy. He did not know what is a proof. And he said, I simply meditate in my dream, the goddess who is there in a place called Namakal, very near Bangalore actually. And she tells me, she shows me this equation, I write it. And most of them are correct. And they're being verified even to this day in United States. I think a professor in Florida or somewhere is working on that. How did he get this knowledge? So there is an approach. That knowledge of, you may say, what is this roots of say, Riemann's theta function may have no bearing on people eating or doing their day-to-day work. But that is some kind of knowledge which is there.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is there. And recently there was one, because you talked about medicine, there is a lot of interest in Ayurveda, no doubt, even in the Western countries. There's one professor by name Dimitrian. Have you heard of him? He's
No.
A Romanian who, during the communist regime, escaped from Romania, came to India. He was basically a medical doctor. He studied philosophy and all that. He became a disciple for a very traditional guru, an orthodox traditional person. If you know about orthodoxy in India, you would know how orthodox they may be. They won't even look at people, they would stay at a distance and kind of thing. It is a matam called in Kanchipuram. Have you visited Kanchipuram?
No, I
No,
have
you did
not.
not. He became his disciple. He was accepted, but taught by silence. Can you believe it?
I can actually.
His diary is
Yeah.
printed. His diary he wrote. He was also a professor of medicine in Paris. After being in India for about 10 years, he went back. He wrote his diary, which is about 800 pages, available in French, available in English. I am reading the English version. It is printed in India, so I am reading it. I am myself amazed because that Swami, he clearly writes what he understood, how the ray came from the eye. Because the title is The Sage with the Eyes of Light is the title of that book. The name of the author is Sergei Dimitrian. I'm amazed. And it says blocks of information was transmitted to him. And this is the tradition. Because the text say that you can communicate in silence much better than by talking. But now I am talking anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I mean you also mentioned dreams. I mean there's lots and lots of inventions and ideas, many more than we realize that have
Yeah,
come from the dream space. There's many and we don't know how many have actually come that just the stories haven't been told. But the dream space seems to be very fruitful, and then you get into meditation and states of silence, and all sorts of different information can come through, but in a different way. It's not the standard intellectual way that modern science favors, right? Modern science only favors this one form that can be packaged in this nice little box and is perfect experimentation, but there's so much more going on, and that's what I really find interesting about these traditions. I'm curious to know about, because for me, and a previous guest on the podcast, he is what he calls himself a novice Vedic meteorologist, right? So he's focused on trying to predict major weather patterns in India and around the world, but using formulas from ancient texts in India, and based on astronomy, essentially. Is this, and the reason that I bring this up is because some of the work that you're doing is actually very important to his work, because I believe he reads a little bit of Sanskrit, but he actually needs help on the Sanskrit part sometimes. And this weather forecasting is becoming more and more important, because we're not able to predict very far out, and you can see kind of how you can predict much longer term weather with the cycles presented in the old ancient texts. Is this something that people are avidly interested in terms of research at all right now?
In terms of research, the long-term modeling in India, I don't think anybody is interested. And unfortunately, um, the research in our universities and in the institution of higher learning, they are strictly imitating the West. It is not even original Western. Sometimes it simply imitates what people are doing in other countries and try to replicate and try to extend it here. That may not work. I doubt very much, because we have to verify. There is no verification for such things. So whatever one says, it goes. But I have my own doubts. On the other hand, sorry, the your friend, I don't know what he predicted about rainfall patterns and all that. See, the medieval India, that is around 6th century AD, there was a person by name Varahamihira. He wrote a book called Brihat Samhita, that is roughly the Gupta period and later. They were all interested in measurement of rain and trying to find out the patterns and all that. That is what I have analyzed in some of my publications. They were rational, they were data based. Based on the data, they were trying to develop some theory that was not based on fluid mechanics or the modern atmospheric sciences or celestial mechanics or Newtonian mechanics. It was purely observational. That was all right for their period. Will that be all right 2000 years later? Now the books are there. You may write the same thing even now. That is what many people do. But they may not come right. That aspect has to be understood.
Right. And do you think that that's partially because of, well, let me just ask you this. Do you personally believe that the weather forecasting capabilities of some of these ancient texts was in fact accurate? Do you think that they were able to predict larger events of drought or good rain and all these types of things using celestial bodies in astronomy?
Not using the astronomy that they had. They might have done something based on past observation as precursors. See, your question takes me to a totally different topic. very important, that is astrology. Astrology imagines, or it is based on some kind of astronomy. That doesn't mean the predictions of astrology are scientific or whatever. So, but precursors are used even today, my moderns, for rainfall and drought, because there are cycles. These cycles we know, sunspot cycle, 11 to 12 years. That was known even in the ancient period. So they would suspect something may happen.
Right.
But there was,
So do you think that, like, let's focus on that part, right? Like the idea that, hey, when Mercury is coming into this nakshatra and it's in this alignment with Jupiter or Mars, that we are expecting the general idea of the weather for this year or this time period to be like this based on historical observation, and that that's one part of the question. But then, is there the potential for a lot of astronomy and physics and mathematics and possibly artificial intelligence to kind of take some of these old ideas from the Vedas and this understanding and to work backwards and create some mathematical models to potentially predict longer term trends in the world today in terms of weather and these types of events?
well, one can do that. You will get a model, but how do you verify it? In fact, you see, some of the work that I did was on rainfall modeling using neural networks. I create a neural network which is 90% accurate for the last 100 years of rainfall data. How do I verify it? I have to use the remaining independent data for about 10 years. I have a database of 120 years. I use 100 years as my data for developing the model, verify it for the remaining 20 years. I get an accuracy of about 60%. The data fit is very good, 90%, 95%. But the independent verification for the independent set of data, that also I have to verify it, otherwise nobody would believe me. It's about 60%. Then I have to make a prediction for next year. That time hasn't yet come for the next year I have to do. It may come out correct, it may not come out correct. So it is a dicey picture. People tend to believe if somebody else does my work and it tells me you do this, I'm happy, I simply do it. 99% of human beings are like that. They will do that. They will think
Right.
what machine intelligence, what artificial intelligence, what this is creating, what Google is throwing out is correct. But how do you know? How? What is
Right.
truth?
Yeah.
So this is a question. This was
Yeah.
all right for when the data was there. See, when in the 6th century or the 10th century, they made these statements, they observed and made that statement that if Mars is near Jeshta, that is Antares, or near the Leonis, there will be no rain. That is in the rainy season. That is in India. It is not for any other country. These things we have to factor it out. But was that true? It might have been true. Now I have to see, is there a cycle of that kind in rainfall? Rainfall data I have only for 100 years. The longest rainfall data official is only in India, because after the British came, they had a very systematic measurement of rainfall. Even though during Chandragupta's time, there was a rainfall measurement part. That part measurement is given in some of the texts. But for the 2000 years, nobody measured the rainfall. They believed what was said. But after the British came, they started measuring rainfall. That is a good thing. Now, all over the world, we have about 100 years, 120 years, but we have paleo's rainfall data. But paleo data is for something else. Paleo rainfall, I cannot use it for modern rainfall prediction. That may give something for a longer prediction, like ice age. Is there going to be a new ice age coming? Those things it will be helpful. But their variation is also large. And that is a question for humanity as a whole. And as you go to longer time period, the standard deviation keeps on increasing. For short time, my prediction will be very correct because the standard variation is very small. So we have to wonder, what is meant by prediction? Is it with zero error you want a prediction? If it is not, then what is statistical? Then what is probability? So what is truth per se? Can truth be probabilistic? Or is the universe really deterministic? Or is the universe probabilistic? So the Vedic people, if you see, they did not think universe is deterministic. It goes in some way, they would say, that is not fatalism. It is not fatalistic. You do some work, but your freedom is limited. You can change nearby, but the large field will not get affected. That goes in some direction. And that itself will have variations. So there is no point in thinking of a deterministic world. That is what it says. It may be confusing, but that is how things are.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. It's almost it's back to the Jane idea earlier. It's both and, it's neither or, it's both neither, and it's all of that type of thing. But it's interesting because with the Western research that I do read, more and more it seems like, and there's hardly any researchers looking at these things, but now they're correlating the sunspot activity or the sun's magnetic cycle to the El Nino phenomena. And to me, these are all very practical things that we need to understand. And I'm just curious of how much potential is there for, let's say, let's put truth and those things aside for some time. Let's just say our goal is to beat the current meteorological algorithms being used with atmospheric sciences by the Indian government today, or other forecasting places. Is there a large space for Vedic science and Vedic observation to come in and move, let's say if they're accurate 50% for the coming monsoon season prediction or the cyclones, is there the ability for the Vedic sciences in combination with something like artificial intelligence, mapping the sky, going backwards in time and looking at how they viewed it and then bringing it forward, aligning the time and all these things? Do you feel like there's a big potential there, or is it something that you just, what do you think on that?
See, there is some semantics involved here. Like you said about the Western science and Western approach of sunspot, all these things. Why don't you call it Greek science? Why do you call it Western science? Why don't you call it Greek?
It should be called Greek science, most likely. If we were to say it specifically, that would be the most correct way to say it.
Then why do you call in India whether Vedic science can be included, because the word Vedic, what do you understand by that?
Right.
What?
Even that.
You're right. It is a very serious issue. People with little bit of astrology, which developed in the 6th century onwards, they call it Vedic. That is wrong. If you, simply because it is the same language, it is written in Sanskrit, the text, you call it Vedic. Why? You should not. Because the Vedic things, the corpus, it got fixed by about 500 BC. After that, traditionally, I'm not talking about what Westerners say. The traditional people themselves will not call the others as Vedic. For example, Aryabhata's astronomy, he might have taken something from the Vedic because he was a learned man. Like, in United States, you would have taken something from Aristotle or Socrates or Galileo and all that. But you don't every time say this is Italian, this is Greek, this is this and that kind of thing.
Right.
But why here
Right.
only you have to say that? That is a wrong thing. Because in the Vedic, as I said, they are holistic. In the Rig Veda, how much they were bothered about rain? Rain was important. Did they measure rain? Did they talk about rain? That all comes in the mundane, day-to-day governance. That is for the kings. Obviously, Kautilya, during the Chandragupta Maurya's time, he had to run an empire, which was almost whole of India. So he measured rainfall. But that is not the Vedic rainfall. You can't call it like that.
Right. Right. Okay. So, so yeah,
And hence,
definitely.
whatever is given there, that is all subject to the phenomenon of precision. Like I talked about the pole star, which was there in 3000 BC, because of the 26,000 year precision cycle, because the earth rotates slowly for 26,000 years, the pole star vanished for some time. Vedas say that. Vedas question in one of the Vedas, where is the pole star? Why the pole star is not seen? It asks that question. That is science. That is Vedic science. Now, if you want to adopt what is given in the so-called Vedic meteorology, as it is propagated by some of the mistaken astrologers in India, that is how we would call them, they don't know about precision. They don't know that the equinoctial star has shifted. They don't know that even the pole star is different today because they have stopped observing. So you have to see that the people who carried this knowledge, are they bona fide or are they just namesake? They have carried on some tradition for their livelihood.
Right.
90%,
And you
are
mentioned
livelihood.
this, most of its livelihood, yeah. And you mentioned this with the Pachangs, right? In the monsoon rainfall article that you had written, with the traditional calendar in India that's used, that the timing, if they were to be mathematically accurate, that the timing is off by at least, you said, like 3 weeks, I believe, something like that.
Correct. You are right. You are right.
Right.
You are right. This is what the government of India should recognize. If they want to integrate the ancient data, I have no objection. I'm very much willing to do. That was my interest, actually. I worked in the Center for Atmospheric Sciences in Indian Institute of Science when I wrote this paper. It's possible. To some extent, it is possible. And the ancient data can be reanalyzed. With the modern computers and the facility available and the power that the government of India has today and the interest it has in understanding the ancient culture and all that. But it has to be sincere. It cannot be something hand waving. It cannot happen like that. It is a hard work
Yeah,
that
it's
has
a
to be
lot of
done.
work.
It has to
Yeah.
be done.
And so this is one of my core questions is anyone actively doing that in India? Is anyone pursuing this from looking at the ancient text, the information there in combination with proper mathematics and computer modeling and the ability to look back in time and then to use whatever rainfall data is there or earthquake data or whatever is there? I mean, is anyone actively doing this in India today?
Well, let me say, for the
Sincerely.
earthquake, for the earthquake data, uh, we did. Myself and one of my students, we joined and we did that. That report is available in the National Disaster Management Agency. But for many of the government agencies, I mean, all over the world, I'm sure about it, disasters are rare. Disasters have to be managed. Disasters cannot be prevented. I mean, that is a kind of a policy issue which comes up. Science is one, the policy is the other. So when they look at from the policy point, because I worked with them also closely, with the government people sometime, economically it makes sense, you manage it. In the sense, if there is going to be a drought, they know in India there is going to be a drought once in 3 years or 4 years. That means the rainfall goes down and fluctuation happens. If you have sufficient food stock, the question is one of distributing it. So if you are so much dependent on rainfall prediction only, you're going to be troublesome. So they manage it like this. And I think that is quite sound. The problems that are going to be there are how to distribute. Because the country is very vast, where the rainfall is deficient, where the rainfall may be more, that if you can know 3 months in advance, you can book the railway wagons and send the fertilizer to that place. People have come and discussed with me these questions also. That's why I'm specifically telling. For the earthquakes, it is very dicey. You can't predict anything in advance. We can only know in a particular place what is the kind of shaking that may happen. That is what we would call in seismology the hazard. And the hazard has to be quantified, and you design the building for this kind of force. For this kind of acceleration, you design the building. Now, the building people, the question is going to be, is it a multi-story building, a 40-story apartment, or an individual flat? That depends on the soil condition. Earthquakes happen very deep, the origination of an earthquake, the fault. But the earth vibrates at the top 10 meters or so. That is what causes the damage. So there is a whole chain which happens. So at what scale you look at it? A building is of a scale of only 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. Whereas a fault is of 100 kilometers and the ground shaking is for 1,000, 2,000 kilometers. So you have to balance. That is probabilistic. In fact, it's the probabilistic hazard is what is done all over the world. Even in India, we have done that. This all comes up very important for large dams, for nuclear reactors, because they have to be safe for a longer period of time. That is where humanity has to be involved, the whole of the world. Whereas at the city level, urban level, it is the real estate people who are controlling, because the land cost is higher than the building cost. I hope you get the point. In a
Yeah.
city like New York, even in Bangalore, the land cost is higher than the building cost. The building falls down, doesn't matter. The loss is less. The land has to be there. That is how they look at it. In other words, we have become so materialistic, Human beings all over the earth, we have become so materialistic. We don't look at it from the long time humanity angle, from the sustainability angle. It is only by talked. Sustainability, climate change, they're being talked about. We are
So
not contributing to that.
let me ask you this, because you mentioned something earlier of when you're looking at these ancient texts, that there are these larger and these different climatic shifts and things happening. And so um, it's interesting to play in this space, because there's the potential of, well, what does that mean for climate change? Is climate change, quote, real in the way that it's currently being discussed in the reductionistic science world and by the governments, and I mean, everywhere you look, you get hammered with the idea of climate change. Yet when you start to go back in time, it's clear that it's always moving and shifting, and I think in the monsoon article that you had written, you talked about there's an ancient description of like a 12-year drought, right? A very long, prolonged drought. Now, if any type of drought like that happens today, immediately in the news and on the articles online, it will say this drought happening in India, Africa, Greece, Spain, because of climate change, or increase because of climate change. What do you think about those kind of dynamics?
Yeah. Uh, I'm quite right now clear, particularly from the Vedic textual information. The long droughts are due to some atmospheric, or what you may call celestial phenomena.
And what do you mean by that exactly?
Yes, exactly. There is a statement in the Rig Veda that a mountain called Arbuda, it went down because Indra pushed it down. That was one of the important activities, heroic activity of Indra. This is interpreted as a mythology. Actually, the Aravali mountain range, which runs from the Indian Ocean into Delhi, and then after Delhi it goes into the Himalayas, is sunk before Delhi. If you have seen the map, that is the place where the ancient Saraswati river dried up. And the vanishing of Saraswati is mentioned in the text. And that's definitely a climate change. And the climate change, maybe lack of rainfall, all this connected. Maybe there was an atmospheric blast, because it talks about a huge sound which done like this and all that. Now, the people
And
who
so
were there,
atmospheric, just to clarify, means like coming from the sun or the planets or some celestial force, or what does that mean to you?
to me, it means an asteroid impact or a cometary, a piece coming and impacting, either in the ocean, which created a tsunami, because there are references to tsunamis in the text, that ocean waves clearing out and all that. But the timing is not clear. When all of this, did they occur together? They might not have. Reason is, the people who lived during that era, they are no more. They would all vanished along with that. Only the people who heard this, maybe 2 or 3 generations later, from their previous other people, not even the grandparents, but by somebody telling this happened, they have carried it forward. But the telltale signs of that can be seen. And this has been investigated by moderns also. Now, for example, you would have known about Hancock, Graham Hancock, is propagating a particular theory of ice age, and there is going to be a cometary impact happening and all that. And there is a book called The Cosmic Winter by Klube and Napier. In fact, I corresponded with Napier because I published a paper mentioning about comets in the Rig Veda. The comets which are mentioned, the Dhumaketu in the Rig Veda, which is interpreted in a ritualistic, sacrificial sense in the later Sanskrit Hindu text. I propose it is actually a comet because the description matches with a comet. And in a cometary impact in the Gujarat, Ran of Kutch region also I wrote in my papers. So some of those people, maybe they had similar concepts. So we corresponded also with that. That seems to be happening. When it happens, I don't know. But there is definitely a long cycle, a 5,000-year cycle or something like that, of great atmospheric disturbance. And that disturbance may be combined with comets and meteoritic showers. It is actually meteoritic showers, not just one meteor going like that, because there are descriptions of different size, stones falling, what kinds of things are created by them. There is a 5-way classification of the bolides, the burning things, the long serpent-like kind of stones coming and hitting. And Rudra. Rudra is actually a terrible god in the Rig Veda who kills cows and people. So people pray to him. Yeah, obviously I pray to a person so that I am protected because I can't control him, He is all powerful. That is true. And that is the starting point of understanding what is our situation, what is the meaning of life, what is meant by universe. So these two go side by side. That is the analytical approach of understanding what is a star, what is its life, and the human beings are created like that. It is not neither Western nor Eastern, according to me. Thinking is common to all human beings. At some time, some groups think in a particular way. And like you said, there are going to be ups and downs. There are spatial fields. This is generally ignored by people. People, when we talk of cycle, we always think of time cycle. But the time is not separate from a wave. There is always a frequency wave duality. A high frequency is for shorter periods, spatially, is a short wavelength. If you have a long wavelength, the period will be longer and all that. So if an effect has to go for a longer distance, it has to be a low period frequency. Low frequency period which can happen. So over only a long time, these things change. I hope I have explained. But
yeah. I'm curious to know a little more about, so how much reading or understanding have you done of Graham Hancock's theories, and what are your general thoughts on some of those in with your background and understanding this from the Indian perspective of your studies?
No, Hancock I have not critically studied. He also talks of some history. He produced some videos and other things about Krishna and so many things. Some of them, they may not be scientifically very accurate. I want to be as accurate or as specific as possible to the extent. But I think it's reasonable what he says. Particularly, I know about the astronomical theory of Napier and Kluber, who are in UK, who are from UK. They have produced a mathematical model also for the meteoritic showers occurring, why there should be a meteoritic shower 6 months apart. Now, this 6 months apart were interesting to me from my Mahabharata angle. Now, Mahabharata, I'm sure you know about it. Now, there is a Vedic connection with Mahabharata. And there is a deity, god, called Kumara. Kumara is a very common name, you know about it. Also called Kartikeya, also called Guha, so many names. Murugan in Tamil Nadu. He is actually the son of Kritika. Kritikas are the Pleiades. Pleiades is a constellation, and he was born to Kritika. He's called Kartikeya because of that. He was born to Shiva. Shiva is the Rudra. Rudra is the star of Ardra Nakshatra. Ardra is next to Gemini. Beta Gemini is a red star. So from there are meteoritic showers which are possible. Now this Kritika, Kartikeya, has a brother. It's called Vishaka. Vishaka is Alpha Libra. Alpha Libra is 180 degrees away from Pleiades, from Alpha Tauri, Alcyon. The name is Alcyon star, 180 degrees away. So in India, there is a religious function, even to this day. They would observe one in June, one in December, 6 months apart, as the birth of Kartikeya. Now, if you take it in a religious sense, it's okay. I have nothing wrong in it. I also do that because the whole earth is only, the whole universe has to have only a single principle. It has to be, call it Brahman, or you call it Vishnu, or you call it by any name, I don't care. So the trees, the human beings, everything should be pervaded by that. That is the concept, the Vedic concept. So if they consider a star or a meteor and the worship, I have no objection on that. But it is also, mathematically, you can show that 6 months apart, if I release a particle which was released by Napier has worked out this, from the Oort cloud somewhere in 5000 BC, after about 1500 years, you can expect concentration of two groups of particles 6 months apart to be observed by human beings. Because it has to cut the ecliptic at 2 points, 180 degrees away. That is there in the text. That can be shown roughly by mathematics also. I am happy with it. Because it's the knowledge which human beings should be happy about.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of Vedic work, Vedic science should be seen carefully. That may be telling something not just to the Indian government, but to everyone.
And so, who do you talk to about these things? Like, do you have friends that are researchers as well, or academics that are interested in these similar topics as you?
Few of them, two or three of them. Not
Wow.
many, not many. And as I said, the Indian research establishment, they're more in a different, they are more interested in getting honors, international honors, getting positions. I don't blame them. All over the world, it is like that.
Mm.
There are a few small groups here and there. Yeah, there are people. I do talk to them. From Hancock's group, there is one Sharma, Vibhuti Sharma. Recently wrote a book called The Yuga Shift. The Yuga Shift. And Vibhuti Dev Mishra, some such name. He's from Calcutta in India only. And they're working towards whether an apocalypse is possible in next year, 2025. The reason is because the in all of the Indian texts, this kind of oscillation cycle is the truth. If you ask for a commonality, that is the thing. Whether it's 1,000 years, 2,000 years, they won't answer that exactly. The exact answer, if you want, it is not going to be analytical. It has to be intuitive. There are people who may give intuitive answers. That is where the dichotomy comes. The analytical type of knowledge for human goodness, intuitive type of knowledge for human beings. Both are needed. The interesting thing for me, the Vedic civilization recognized both, whereas the modern civilization, as it is today, the majority, they ignore the intuitive approach. But the intuitive approach can be very deceiving because people can deceive you very easily. I hope you understand because there are
Yeah.
charlatans. Just
Hmm.
for the sake of money, they will say something. We should not do that. But there are people. This Vibhuti Mishra, he talks of a yogi by name Yukteswar Giri. You might have heard of Paramahamsa Yogananda, who has written the autobiography of a yogi. His teacher to teacher was a great yogi in Hardwar or somewhere. He made some predictions. So this Vibhuti Mishra refers to them and all that. They had no axe to grind, those people. They made some statement, but they were written by their students or the disciples. They themselves did not write anything. How those were transmitted becomes important. Whether that was transmitted correctly, because it is oral, or whether there have been changes, that has to be understood. So the recent intuitive statements of this kind have to be carefully analyzed. Whereas for the most ancient period, why I am doing that, it was orally transmitted, no doubt. But for oral transmission, they had a mathematically accurate method developed. How I had to keep a text same over 2,000 years or 4,000 years. Even to this day, Rigveda is uttered all over India in the same way, oral. And UN recognized this as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Preserving a text for 5,000 years orally. So if I have a doubt in my printed text today, I can go to my school somewhere nearby. There are not many such people, very few. I can go and ask them, you please repeat this. I will see how he repeats that. and say, okay, this letter may be this or it may be something else. That is possible. So these people, they're not the intuitives. They're only the transmitters, like a tape recorder. They don't understand, they don't know. Some of them they know, unless they have spent time in understanding them. But they know how to preserve it.
Which is interesting, because the language is fulfilling itself in its own funny way, right? Where, hey, actually all these people don't need to understand it, but it's still being transmitted, which is a testament to the the nature of that language and how that language is operating. It's very interesting. So you mentioned a lot of, charlatans, and they're all over the world, but it definitely seems that maybe one of the hottest places to find a charlatan is in the Indian astrology charts. I mean that
I
that
agree.
that. So um, I'll finish with this question, because we could go on for many hours,
Yeah,
and so I want to let you go enjoy your Sunday morning, and I want to go to sleep. But is there any pachang? Is there any calendar in India that you will actually read yourself, that you believe is accurate to the best of your mathematical knowledge? Has anyone produced a yearly calendar based on the mathematics that you know to be correct?
there's one calendar that is produced. It's not very popular. See, the calendars are called Panchanga. They're used for
Changa.
religious purposes mostly,
Mhm.
not for other purposes. Uh, there are a few. They correct for the precision and those things also.
Okay.
Uh, but it's a different subject.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No worries. Okay, so quickly tell us, that way in the future maybe we can have another call. But tell us, what are you currently working on right now in these months?
Yeah, I wish I could have shown you. I'm working on a manuscript, which was manuscript is orally transmitted. It is a manuscript on astronomy, which talks of some cosmography and also about some ancient calendar, how the year started. See, today even in India, the year is starting from spring equinox, somewhere near the spring equinox. Don't worry about the other calendars, the Panchangas, roughly like that. But in the more ancient time, it started either with the summer solstice or with the winter solstice. It's very interesting as an observational astronomy because at the solstice, sun rises at the same point. It seems as though he's stationary for about 10 to 12 days. That is why it is called a solstice. Solstice means stand still. So somewhere the summer solstice nowadays maybe June 21st or something like that. Winter solstice December 21st, like that. They found out the nakshatra with which sun was rising. So with reference to that nakshatra, that is the early morning nakshatra, they said sun is in this nakshatra. For example, in the Vedic period, in the second millennium BC, or even before that, summer solstice was in the Leo, near star Regulus. There are actually 5 stars in that constellation. It is not the modern Leo. I am working on it. Now, after some 500 years, this changed. They shifted the year beginning to the winter solstice. So then the winter solstice, it was rising in a star, what we would call roughly Aquarius. Not exactly the constellation Aquarius, but very near that. This continued for nearly 1,000 years. Later, around 500 BC or so, they shifted to the equinoctial system, that the celestial equator and the ecliptic intersect and all that. So that became this.
Is that because of Greek or European influence in some way?
I doubt very much. I don't think so. There might have been some Greek influence is there only after 200 AD. In the more ancient texts, I cannot see any Greek influence. For example, in the text that I am editing, there is no Greek influence. But they did not know equinox specifically. Approximately they knew. Not as the section of the ecliptic and this. These are the interesting things. They say it is a day when the morning and the night are of equal duration. So it was tropical. See, the Greek concept, the Ptolemies, by that time, even the Siddhantic astronomy, it is there. They knew the celestial equator and the ecliptic intersecting and all that. The more ancient thing, it is not like that. They talk in terms of seasons, mostly seasons. So season means light, whether the day is longer, day is equal to night. The mantras are also like that. The day and night are equal, so you tell this mantra for the ritual. So the Vedic rituals were essentially time tracking devices. They, they
Okay.
did not
Yeah.
they did not specifically say that. Let me say that.
Yeah.
But they
But that's,
essentially did that. They did
yeah.
only that one, nothing else. If
Yeah.
you see the mantras, it is all sun is there, is going up, this, that, all kinds of such things. And you know the altars which were there, they were either circle, they would say sun is circular, so have this as circle. Then you have square. Say earth is square, so you have it as square. Or you know the sky is circle, you have it as a circle. But the two areas have to be equal. The area has to be equal. So the square has to be equal to the circle while you do the sacrifice. So they bring mathematics, esoteric mathematics, circling the square, irrational numbers, much before Greek and Pythagoras. Pythagorean triplet, most important triplet, 15, 8, and 17. Usual thing is 3, 4, 5. The Vedic most important triplet is 8 square plus 15 square is going to be 289. Square root of that is 17. Because Prajapati is 17. You get the feeling. 15 is Paksha, 15 is moon. 8 is also half moon. 8 is half moon. You see the 8th day, if you see the phase, it is a semicircle moon. So the semicircle is generally above you. You see the argument. And the distance from here to here is 15. If you add the two, east to west. And if you want to know the distance from the semicircle, the moon on the 8th day, the Ashtami, to the horizon, it is a right angle triangle 15 square plus 8 square, square root, the hypotenuse is 17. 17 is the number for Prajapati. So you pray to Prajapati as 17. I have written about this.
Okay. Very cool.
This kind of mathematics is very special to India. This is not Greek. Later it has come. I don't deny that. So
Yeah,
I mean,
I was curious about that part because the most people, don't realize that Vedic astrology and Western astrology or Greek Egyptian astrology is they're different, right? The Indian astrology is actually using where the stars and planets are today, whereas because of the way that the system works in Greek or Babylonian, Egyptian astrology, that the timing is different. And so I'm just curious about if there was, when you see the switch in the Indian text, if there was any influence or if that switch is similar at all.
it is there. It is there after about 300 AD. It is there. But in the Vedic period, in the more ancient period, in fact, that is what I am right now editing, which contains some astronomy and then says that these were all created to help human beings to carry out their action. That action, they give a signal. That signal is given by the combination of moon with the nakshatras first.
Really quickly, can you just really quickly describe the nakshatras to the audience for people to understand what those are? Just very, very quickly.
Oh, these nakshatras in the most ancient period, there were groups of stars counted as 27. Probably long before, there were bright stars identified individually, which those people they understood. Details are not available. But by about 1800 BC, this concept of nakshatra formalized. Formalized means sun passes through 27 nakshatras in a year, and in each nakshatra he spends 13 and a half days. So 365 divided by 27 roughly comes to that. So this 13 and a half days is sunrise. How many days he rises? So as you observe before sunrise, the nakshatra you see early morning is sun's nakshatra. That is how it started. But as I said about the solstice, near the solstice, sun doesn't change his azimuth. He rises in the same nakshatra. So that nakshatra is a group because the stars will change. Each day a new star will come to that point. That was actually Leo originally and also Aquarius. There are a group of stars, about 4. So the nakshatras, they converted into a group of stars. Totally 86 stars make 27 nakshatras. There is a misunderstanding even among Hindus and Indians on this. They think there are only 27 stars. It is not. They are made up of 86 stars, but 27 equal parts in the sky through which sun was moving. It is solar. Through which, of course, moon also moves. Even the later planets also move. So it's an evolution of observational astronomy. It is
Right.
not in
And
one day they got everything. No, that is not true.
right. And so just to give the audience a little more understanding, so in kind of Vedic astrology or even in some of the astronomical meteorology stuff, the nakshatras are almost going to give kind of color to what's going on in the celestial bodies at that time, right? So it's not only, hey, right now Mars energy is present and that's going to be felt, but it's the sun is also in this nakshatra, which means there's this combination of energies, and it's a little bit more complex in how it manifests.
Exactly. Nakshatras were the coordinates. They are the coordinates, the most important thing. That goes into a very deeper theory of creation. That is the Agni Shoma principle. Agni Shoma is roughly plus minus, positive, negative, male, female. The book that I am editing clearly says Soma is male. All the nakshatras are female. So it is the combination of these two which produces effects on earth. And they can get a signal if they understand that what should be done. Now the basic question again is very serious. It is the time. When they have to do something or when something happens, it is in time. And Soma is continuous. Time is continuous. Whereas the 27 nakshatras are discrete blocks. So they wanted to measure time, the continuous time with this. And the whole of the philosophy, which is connected with this, is a kind of a wave. What they say is, time moves like a river, continuous. There is no break. It is irreversible. It is in the Vedas. I am quoting from the Veda only. It cannot go back also. But there are waves in water. There are waves in time also. That wave is caused is by the combination. The combination of Soma with the nakshatra and with a precursor of the Devata. That Devata was an anomalous activity which happened in the most ancient time, which is mentioned in the Rig Veda. They are the gods or the Devata. There is a lot of misunderstanding on this. For example, it gives an example. In Kritika, that is in Pleiades, it is Agni Devata. Agni is fire. So when moon, Soma is moon, generally taken as moon. When moon is in Kritika Nakshatra, that nakshatra on that day, you do all work which is connected with fire. That means it may be goldsmith work, or it may be firewood. You want to bring firewood, or you want to quarrel with somebody very forcefully. These are the kind of things which are mentioned. But that is later. That is not in the Vedas. What action should be done? That the later people have developed, depending on the quality which is there. And this wave is not just due to nakshatra. The planets also come there. The planets are anomalous. Planets have their own property. That is again with time. So once they understood the revolution of the planets, they wanted to know with the nakshatra, the natal nakshatra, that is the birth nakshatra. I am born under a particular nakshatra. That is not the solar, that is the lunar, where moon was positioned. So if the star comes there to that nakshatra, and the planet also comes there, something may happen to this fellow. That is the origin of horoscopic astrology. But the horoscope today practice is different. But in India, they still talk of lunar. They have taken a lot of things from Western concept, the Rashi, solar, the 12 and all that. But in a more ancient period, individual prediction was not the important thing. It was the community prediction. For the community, what happens?
And for the weather and the big events happening, right? My understanding, even Babylonian astrology. Originally, it has nothing to do with the individual human being or personality, any of these things. It's mostly on floods and catastrophe and other tracking of celestial events, and in combination with the earth is my understanding so far.
But you see, you have to put a timeline for these things. Initially, I agree with you. It is in the book that I am reading also, that is roughly about 1800 BC, let me say. It is there. It is the community thing which is important, of earthquakes, of rainfall, of explosions, and so many things. But within about 100 years, there are sentences which happens to the particular person also. They are called the Nadi Nakshatra. That means, people keep on thinking if something can happen to a group of people, can I say something happens to an individual? It is like dividing the time into discrete parts, dividing the community, the society also into individuals. So I would say that over, say, the last 10,000 years, it is not just the intellectual wealth, whole humanity has gone from an intuitive approach, is entering into a very clearly discretized theoretical, and looking everything from a small, it is a nitpicking approach. That is what is happening. And this may also change, because the text would also say there are cycles in this time. So all these things would also change. So it is a self-similar structure. That is what I would like to bring out. This is all stacked. It is a labyrinthine kind of, what shall I say, history that I am understanding in the Vedic text. It is self-similar. But that self-similarity, when you explain, you want to give a structure. So if I see a forest, everything looks beautiful to me. But if I see a tree, something different comes out. It tries to give both. So we get bogged down and sometimes lost in this kind of a maze. And some of the questions you are raising about astrology, time, and all this, it is essentially that. The most ancient thing looks very beautiful. There are waves. Can't I have a wave in time? Whether they saw it is different, theoretically. So how do I define? Maybe something else comes there, some effect, a meteoritic shower in a season. Yeah, then there is more rainfall. So that is a wave in time. That is the concept which is there. I am not putting it up. So even yearly there are small waves. Long years there are waves. Still longer there are going to be waves. Like there is a 6th season in India. Europe there are only 4. We are having 6. You can have more. That is the concept. Now, how do you make a prediction to an individual? You have to structure that further, because the time period of a human being is only 100 years, whereas the time period of a society is going to be longer. So they talk of sacrifices, satra, that is the rituals, which go for 100 years, which are for 1,000 years. And the commentators write, the same person could not have done for 1,000 years. So his family people might have carried it out, they say. What they meant, we don't know. But such kind of concepts are there, which match with some of the questions you raised of Hancock and others, whether a new ice age may come, whether there can be an apocalypse, or what may happen to humanity. whether human beings can go to Mars, whether can we put a colony in moon, these questions come up.
Wow. Okay. Well,
So it's a self-similar universe is what the Vedas are proposing. That's what I would say.
well, I
And
also
this,
you definitely expanded some. You gave me some very. I have enough things to go for at least a
yeah,
couple of
that's right.
months. You know, but it's interesting because in I'm developing a theory that when I'm looking at many indigenous traditions and ancient traditions, um, you see the deep underlying theme that comes out is space and time, and knowing where you are in space and time. And part of this theory that I'm coming up with is that actually a lot of the I mean, it's holistic, right? I mean, obviously, it's never one thing, if we look at things from a holistic perspective. But I have a very deep intuitive feeling that a lot of the cognitive diseases that are happening with Alzheimer's and dementia and these types of things are because people are no longer involved with knowing really where they are in space and time, and because of the internet and how the mind is projected into there, and how no one is, people are not doing ritual at solstices and equinoxes, and they're not paying attention the way that this brain and body evolved originally, and that these cognitive diseases are something to do with a very big issue with space and time. So it's very interesting how you brought up even mantra is keeping time, right? It's
True.
keeping time. Very interesting.
I have written a paper on how time was measured in the ancient time, in the Vedic time. Have you seen that paper?
I think I saw the title of that one, but some of those things
Okay.
they're too difficult for me to understand. I'm not smart enough to understand
Maybe you should
some of
you
these things.
should come you should come to Bangalore sometime. We can sit and talk about it.
Yes, I would love that. I can see that in the future. I might come in the next couple of years. I will come to
Okay.
probably do some Ayurvedic study in Kerala. So I'll come to Bangalore as well.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But
That's nice.
yes. Well, thank you so much, Professor Iyengar. It honestly, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you, and hopefully we can speak again in maybe 6 months or so when you've gotten
Sure.
more work on this book, and we can talk more about that as well.
Sure. Thank you so much. Send me a copy of the recording. Thank you.